Hi, my name is Fernando Cardenas. I'm the quality manager here at Sunset Wire in Fontana, California. So here at Sunset Wire, we have a lot of different ways to make sure that the wire that you're purchasing is exactly what you want and what you're getting. We have a lot of customers that are either automotive, commercial, or aerospace, and every one of them is expecting the product to come in a certain condition, a certain size, certain finish. By testing and doing a lot of different tests that we have available to us, we make sure that whatever the requirements they have, we can meet those requirements, and we also make sure that we can do that consistently. Here at Sunset Wire, we have several different tests that we perform on the wire before you get it, so that way we make sure you're getting exactly what you want in the condition that you want. In this video, we'll be talking about 9 of those different tests that we have for you. The first test that we'll be talking about is tensile strength testing. It's basically pulling the wire apart, and it can be done with any diameter. We perform this test to large machines, and we make sure that whatever testing that we're performing at that time is meeting their requirement. So to determine the kind of force that we want to measure and how much we're supposed to be getting in terms of the pounds, so the KSI, which usually that's the measure that we use, we go either by the customer specification. They'll usually tell us whether it's 100 to 150 and 125. Most of the time we use industry standards from ASTM or AMS, and depending on the alloy, whether it's nickel, whether it's 17.7, whether it's 304, they all have different standards. The next test that we're going to be talking about is the alloy check. The purpose of the alloy check is to make sure that whatever it is that you're ordering is actually what you're getting. So if you're ordering, for example, nickel 200, we make sure that you are getting nickel 200. We do this by using an XRF analyzer. It just looks like a scanner that's portable. We apply it to the material and it'll emit X-rays directly into the material, and after a few seconds it'll give us a reading based on what it's detecting. On the rare occasion that we get material that the XRF analyzer is telling us is not matching with the material that we're trying to send out, we'll go ahead and retest. Sometimes we'll clean off any excess material, excess oil, grease, whatever it may be on the material, and then we test again, just to make sure that you are getting the correct material. The next test we'll be discussing is the wrap test, and that's how we determine the ductility of the wire and also the surface integrity. And we perform this by wrapping the wire in a tightly wound coil, and then we look at it under a microscope. If we detect any fractures, breaks, or any other surface defects, then we have to stop, get another sample, and determine if the wire is indeed failing. The next test that we'll be talking about is the coiling test, and that's to determine the wire's ability to withstand plastic deformation. Essentially, the way that we perform this test is by wrapping the wire tightly around a mandrel, and then we put it within 2 jaws in our tensile testing machine, and then we pull that sample, and if the coil is, let's say, 1 inch in length, we'll pull it about 4 times longer than its original length. And we shouldn't see any deformity, we shouldn't see any breaks, it definitely shouldn't crack. Some of the factors that may affect the performance of this test is usually the material itself. If there's deformities, if there's spaces, cracks, issues with the grains, it'll show up there and during the coiling test. The next test that we'll be discussing is the metallographic examination. We look at the microstructure and the macrostructure. This is simply a test where we take a cross-section of the material. It's usually in a puck or a mount made out of epoxy or other material, and we polish it into a mirror finish. We usually dip it in some sort of chemical, and then we look at that under a microscope. There, we're looking for any kind of defect, such as a pit, a crack, some sort of imperfection that may not need to be there. Another thing that we're looking for is to make sure that the structure of the grains is exactly the way it's supposed to look under the microscope. The next test we'll be discussing is the hardness test. It's an indirect way of measuring its internal strength. It's essentially putting an indentation into the wire sample, and it gives us a way to determine if it also meets specific requirements set by the customer or set by a specification. The most commonly used test that we use is HRC, the Rockwell C test. The next test that we'll be discussing are the cast and the Helix test. When we look at the cast, we're essentially laying the wire flat on the floor, and we make sure that it is laying in a circular pattern and be able to see how open the ends are. If they are very open, then there might be an issue. The Helix test, on the other hand, is you take the same 2 loops of wire, or 3 or 4 loops, and you suspend it from your fingertips, and you see how open they are. If you're holding 2 loops of wire, they should be close together. They shouldn't be too far apart, hanging from your fingertips. If they are, there may be an issue. And if there is an issue, we can stop right there, and we can fix it right away by looking or adjusting the equipment, so that way the wire will have the proper cast and the proper helix. The last test that we'll be talking about is a surface check. We use RMS values to determine the smoothness or roughness of the material that we're checking. The lower the RMS value is, the smoother it is. This way, if there is a specific application that may require a smooth surface or as smooth as surface as possible, then we can verify that. After all of these tests are performed and they all pass, then we usually create a material test report. This material test report creates traceability for the customer. So that way, once you get this material, you can see exactly what the specifics are for mechanical properties, where the material came from, if it's meeting the chemistry requirements that you're wanting. And we make sure that your customer can also have that same traceability and they can follow that material from its origin. Here at Sunset Wire, we make sure that all the material that we ship out is going out in the best possible condition, that you're getting the material that you want. However, every once in a while, we will have some defects. So whether the material is failing a tensile test, a chemistry test, or another test, we go ahead and take the material that's failing, sequester it, putting in our QC hold area, our quarantine area under lock and key, and we let the customer know. If there is an issue that the customer is willing to accept because it's minor, might be cosmetic, then we go ahead and ship it to the customer. If the issue is such that it can be reworked by drawing it down further, then we'll go ahead and do that. However, every once in a while we do have issues that are way too big or that are not going to allow us to ship out the material to the customer. When that happens, we go ahead and scrap out the material. But we do these things to make sure that the customer is getting the material that they want. Here at Sunset Wire, we think about quality at every stage of the production process. From the very beginning when the material comes in as raw material, through production, through the inspection process, through the shipping process, we think about quality at every step of the way. We work very hard every day to make sure that the customer is getting exactly what they want, to make sure that the wire that you're getting is going to perform the way you want it to perform. So if you want to learn how to make your wire needs come to reality, please feel free to visit our website and contact our experts.